I would like to begin by introducing myself. My name is Matthew Holewinski, and I'm a technical consultant here with Autodesk. In this presentation today, we'll be taking an exclusive look at every single Nurbs modeling tool that is available in formZ 3D and formZ. As you can see on the left, formZ 3D has a very extensive set of Nurbs modeling tools, which can handle the majority of your organic modeling needs. formZ, which is the bigger brother of formZ 3D, extends the Nurbs capabilities even further by adding even more Nurbs modeling tools. I'm sure that someone out there is about to ask the question, what does Nurbs mean? Well, Nurbs is an acronym for Non-Uniform Rational B-Spline, which is just a fancy name for the mathematics behind how these objects are created. Fortunately, you don't need to know anything about that. All you need to focus on is playfully sculpting your 3D form with ease using the intuitive interface. Nurbs is just another personality that your geometry can have in formZ 3D or formZ. Basically, a Nurbs object consists of a mathematically smooth surface that can be manipulated with a series of control handles and will always render infinitely smooth. A polygon object consists of many polygons, also known as facets, that define the overall shape. And the number of facets will influence how smooth the surface appears when rendered. There's advantages to both types of geometry, and that's why formZ 3D and formZ let you work with both. And it should be mentioned that any smooth Nurbs object can be converted into a faceted object using the Convert tool. Since our focus today is on smooth Nurbs objects, let's begin by using the Nurbs tools to create a conceptual visualization of the facade of a fancy theater. This entire project was modeled and rendered completely in formZ using every single Nurbs tool, which is why this project will be the perfect example to highlight all these powerful Nurbs features. Let's begin by conceptualizing the form of the two towers on each side of the front facade of the theater. These were sculpted using the Nurbs Loft tool, which lets you loft a smooth surface through any number of cross-section shapes, and we'll look at the different parameters that control how tight or how loose the Nurbs surface is generated through those cross-sectional shapes. We'll begin by locating all the Nurbs modeling tools that are available in formZ. Those are located right here. So we have a set of suite of icons that allow us to create Nurbs surfaces. Then we also have another suite of icons which allow us to modify or edit existing Nurbs surfaces that are already in our project. Now, if you're running formZ 3D, I can quickly go to the formZ 3D workspace and show you that the Nurbs modeling tools are down here towards the bottom. Let's go back to the formZ modeling workspace. And let's begin by looking at the Loft tool. Now, to create those towers, I just quickly sketched out a few vector line profiles that sort of approximate the shape of the tower that I want. Now, you can draw accurate shapes if you want, or I can just sketch out some vector lines here. With the Loft tool active, I start clicking at some shapes, and you'll see that it'll automatically loft through the first two shapes that I click on. If I undo, and if I want to generate through multiple shapes, then you have to hold down the Shift key. So I hold down the Shift key, pick the control lines in the proper order that you want it to loft it through, let go of the Shift key, click a blank area, and now it'll loft through all those cross sections. Now, in the tool options over here on the right, you can see that there is a tight lofting option. If I choose that option, then you can see that that surface tightly lofts through the profiles exactly as I have them drawn. So there's no smoothing of that interpolated Nurbs surface as it lofts through those profiles. If I use the loose lofting option, then it does add a little bit of different smoothing across those profiles to give us a more smooth shape. Now, if we want to modify that shape afterwards, we can select the Pick tool, right-click on the object, and Show Controls. And we have a set of control handles that we can use to further manipulate that Nurbs surface. So I can drag that anywhere that I want. So maybe pull this out, or maybe push that in a little bit. Let's do the same thing over here. Maybe grab a hold of this other control back here. Just sort of playfully sculpt that 3D form. Now, if you want to move multiple controls at the same time, then you can just hold down the Shift key, and I can select multiple objects, and then I let go of the Shift key, and now I can go in and move multiple controls at the same time. So let's maybe drag this out a little bit, whatever distance we want, something like that maybe. And that's how we can easily sculpt those Nurbs surfaces. If we want the controls to disappear, right-click on the object, turn the Show Controls off, and now we have our Nurbs surface. for one of the towers for the front facade of our Nurbs Theater. Now let's mirror copy that over to the other side to maintain symmetry with our facade. So I'll use the mirror tool, choose the copy option, click on our object, click 2 points along the y-axis there, and there we have our front 2 towers using the Nurbs lofting tool. Our next phase of the project will be to visualize the glass curtain wall that extends between the 2 towers. We'll use the Nurbs by Boundary Curves tool. This allows us to fill in a Nurbs surface inside the boundary of some existing curves. We can fill in between 2, 3, or 4 curves. The curves can be the edges of existing objects or any line that we draw. So let's try it inside of our project. We have 2 edges that we can fit the surface in between the 2 edges of our existing objects, but we'll have to add a couple of curves in here to define that inside boundary. I'll select the vector line drawing tool, draw it as a 2D shape, and let's snap to the 2 corner points, and there's our bottom line. For the top, I'm going to create a curved profile shape, so I'll select one of the spline drawing tools. I'll use this neat little option here to lock to the plane of the first point that I click on. So now as soon as I click on the top of this object here, you can see that my drawing plane automatically locks onto that same plane. So I'll snap to the end, hit E to end, and there's our nice curve. Now we can adjust that curve by modifying these control handles here. So let's sort of stretch this back a little bit and sort of tweak that profile curve that we have. And now we have some curves that define this boundary. And now we can fill that in using the Nurbs by Boundary Curves tool. When I select that, I can select the edges in any order. I'll click my vector line, the edge of that object, and hold down the Shift key to make sure it knows that you're selecting multiple edges. And I select the other edge of the object over there, and it automatically fills it in with a nice Nurbs surface. If you want more control over how the Nurbs surface is defined within the boundary of those curves, we can move on to the next Nurbs generation tool, which is the Nurbs by UV Curves tool. What this allows us to do is add additional curves inside the boundary to help control how the Nurbs surface is generated within the boundary of those curves. Let's try that on our front facade. I'm going to undo, go back to our original lines that we had there, and I'm going to move and make a copy of the bottom line. Let's raise that up a little bit. Tap the Command key to go perpendicular, and now we have another line added right there. Let's create another curved line up through the middle here. Let's go back to our spline drawing tool and snap to the midpoint. I turned off the lock to plane because now I want to move it in 3D space here, so I can snap to the midpoints here. Click on the end over there. And once again, we'll make any adjustments that we want, so I can grab these control handles and further tweak that control curve that's fitting through my other lines that are there, and just sort of approximate the shape that I want. Maybe pull that a little forward, and there we go. Now we have a network of curves that sort of defines the shape that I want. So now I can move on to the Nurbs by UV Curves tool. I can select the curves in any order, but you can also think of the Nurbs by UV as doing a 2-directional lofting process. So we have a series of lines going in this direction, and then I can also shift to hold to multi-pick all the controls going in that direction. But you can pick them in any order. It'll figure it out for you. And once we have those selected, I let go of the Shift key, click a blank area, and you can see now it has interpolated it through the entire network of curves. In addition to the ability to show controls and move them around like we saw earlier, there's also the Nurbs Edit tool. The Nurbs Edit tool is only available in formZ and extends the control point editing even further by letting you control additional parameters of your control points, such as being able to numerically enter values for position and weight, swapping the UV direction of your controls, and controlling the type of closure for closed Nurbs objects that have a seam. So let's see how that tool works. We select the Nurbs Edit tool. We click on our Nurbs surface, and all of our controls are visible. If we select one of those controls, then you can see in the tool options we have additional parameters that allow us to modify things, such as typing in numeric information for the exact position of where we want that control point to be. The next phase of the visualization of our theater might be to conceptualize the front entrance where all the doors are located. We create a nice curved section for the entrance here, and a great tool to help us out with that will be the Nurbs Split tool. The Nurbs Split tool lets you slice a Nurb surface into a smaller network of separate Nurb surfaces, which is a great way to add additional detail into your overall form. So I can take my existing form here and split it and then work with those other surfaces to continue to derive my overall shape. So let's do that. Let's use the Nurbs Split tool. Click on any Nurbs object, and you can split it into any number of separate Nurbs objects. In the tool options over here, I can control whether I split it in just the V direction or just the U direction, which is just the horizontal or vertical direction. And I can also split it into multiple pieces, which we'll look at in just a moment. So with that, we can see that if I were to use the Move tool and bring that new sliced Nurbs back out, you can see that that is a separate object. So let's bring that out maybe 10 feet. Now we're going to make that glass, so I'll just drop the glass material on there. And if I were to show the controls, you can see that we have a separate Nurb surface with a separate set of controls that I can move and modify. I'm going to grab the whole line of controls right here, and if my cursor's on a guideline, you can see I can hold down the Shift key and it locks it right onto the guideline, so I can snap it back to the original edge back there. Let's do the same thing over here. Select the Move tool, click that entire row of controls, hold the Shift key to lock it on the guide, and snap it back to the original edge. And at this point, we're just going to have some fun sculpting the shape that we want. So maybe curve this back in a little further, so on and so forth. And I think you get the idea of how we can easily take that existing form and split other Nurb surfaces from that to derive new detail into our design. Let's turn the show controls off for this object, and let's continue to use the Nurbs Split tool to add some additional detail for the sign that's going to be in the center of our theater. So with the Split tool, click on the surface again, and this time I'm going to use the number of pieces. So I'm going to tell it that I want 3 pieces along one direction and only 1 along the other. So you can see I've actually split that 3 times, and I can extend this piece out a little bit to be the surface that represents our front sign. Now I would like to take this new surface that we have here and sort of blend it back into the wall back here to get a nice little blended transition. Before I do that though, I'm going to use the Nurbs Extend tool to actually extend the surface and retract it back into itself. The Nurbs Extend tool allows you to click on the edge of any Nurb surface and extend or retract the edge of that surface. And it is not just moving the segment. What it is it's actually moving the edge of the surface, and it maintains the mathematical curvature of that entire surface. So let's see how this works in our project. We'll use the Nurbs Extend tool. I'll click on the edge of my existing Nurb surface, and you can see as I drag that edge, we get these little guidelines. So it sort of locks the extension or the retraction of that edge to match the curvature that's already implicit inside of that Nurb surface. Now to maintain numeric accuracy, I can, in the tool options here, type in numeric information. So I can go back exactly 2 feet if I want. So this helps out in this case because I can actually take the edge of this Nurb surface, click on it on the other side here, and just simply drag that, and I can type in the same value. So let's go -2 feet on the other side. And so this is the way that we can maintain our symmetry by retracting the edge the same distance on both sides of that Nurbs surface. And now we have a nice gap that we can fill in using the Nurbs Blend tool, and that's the next tool we'll be looking at. The Nurbs Blend tool lets us select 2 edges of any existing objects in our scene and create a nice little transitional blend between those 2 surfaces. And there's all sorts of continuity settings which controls the smoothness or tangency as it rolls off of one surface to the other. So let's see how we can use that in our project. Well, we'll select the Nurbs Blend tool. We'll click on the edges of our 2 objects here, and it creates a nice little blended fill with a Nurbs surface. Our continuity settings over here allow us to control how it rolls off of one surface and blends into the other. So for the first edge, we can set that to a tangential type of continuity. So you can see we get a nice tangent surface there. And then for the second edge, I can change that to be a G0 positional, so meaning it just goes straight to that edge. So we can either have it smooth and tangent, or we can just have it positionally connect to the other edge that is there to get a variety of different type of blending techniques. So let's do the same thing over here. We use the Blend tool. We have the first set to tangent and the second set to positional. So the first edge will be tangent, and the second one will be positional. And there's a nice little blended transition. Let's do the same thing again to add another sign detail along the middle here, so we'll go through that exact same process again. We'll use the split tool to split our surface. We'll drag it out just a little bit. And then we'll use the extend tool to grab the edges of our existing NURBS surfaces and retract them back and maintain the curvature of that surface, and type in numeric information so that as I retract the other edge over here, I can retract that back the same value to maintain the symmetry in my project. Now we have a nice little gap there that we can then use the blend tool to blend a new NURBS surface to fit and fill that gap. Now that we have the overall shape and form defined here, we can add some materials to that. We can use the wood material and drop it on there. Nice gold material for the transitions, and then maybe the transparency for the glass. We can drag and drop those if we want, or just use the paint tool to quickly paint whatever the active material is on those surfaces. Maybe put a gold on the rest of these transitions here. And there, our front facade of the theater is beginning to take shape. Now, speaking of the blend tool, we can also use the blend tool for filling in areas other than blended transitions like we have there. We can just maybe cap off the top of this area here. So let's see how that works. What I can do is select this edge, and then if I select the second edge, it's going to blend it. But if I hold down the shift key, now I can select multiple edges. So I'll actually select every single edge of all these other surfaces that are over here. And when I'm all done selecting all those edges, I let go of the shift key, click a blank area, and it creates a nice little blended transition for us. And we can make that positional if we want, so it goes straight from the edge of one surface to the other. And you can see it's actually filling in that boundary exactly based on those edges that I clicked on. Now in this project, I actually want this roof for the front entrance to actually extend flat back along the front lobby here. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to show you another way we can use the NURBS Blend tool. Besides going along multiple edges, we can also blend to any other objects. They don't have to be NURBS. So for example, I can draw a vector line that's going to extend from the snap to the endpoint here, and let's draw the line snapping to the endpoint over there. And now that's just a separate line. It's not a NURBS object or anything. And now using the blend tool, you can see I can actually select the front edge of this NURBS surface, and then I'll select just this vector line that's there. And you can see it actually fills a NURBS surface inside that boundary. So the NURBS Blend works with not just NURBS objects. You can actually blend between any two types of objects, and you can also blend through multiple edges. And we'll see some other examples of that in just a moment also. And now let's conceptualize a possible balcony that might be on the second story overlooking the front entrance. We'll accomplish this using the Nurbs Convert tool. The Nurbs Convert tool lets you convert any object into a NURBS object. Each surface or each face of the object will become a NURBS surface. For example, we can create a 2D rectangle and convert that into a NURBS with a set of controls that we can further manipulate to create a more complex form. So let's try that in our project. We'll look at the second story by maybe creating a 2D surface here that represents the second story balcony. We'll use the 2D rectangle drawing tool, make it a 2D shape, snap to the corner point, and just create a 2D rectangle. Let's move that into position. Maybe bring it back a little bit, and also bring it up a little higher. And there's our second story floor for the balcony. Now if we were to look at the controls of that 2D rectangle right now, right click on it, and you can see the show controls give us just length and width only. So we select the Nurbs Convert tool, click on the object, and now it's a NURBS object. It looks pretty much the same, but you can see now if we were to turn those controls on, now we have a separate set of independent controls that we can move anywhere. If we want to increase or decrease the number of control points on our NURBS surface, we can use the Nurbs Reconstruct tool. What the Nurbs Reconstruct tool does is lets you increase or decrease the number of controls on any existing NURBS surface. When reconstructing a NURBS surface, there's really only two parameters that you need to be concerned with. The first parameter at the top is the degree of the surface, which determines how smooth the surface interpolates through the control points. As you can see, a NURBS surface set to a degree of 1 fits straight through each control point. A degree of 2 adds some smoothing between the intermediate control points, and as you increase even further, a degree of 3 adds even more smoothing as the surface is interpolated through those control point locations. I usually use a degree of 3 for the majority of my Nurbs objects. The second parameter at the bottom determines the actual number of control points on the surface. The value for the length U direction determines how many control points are placed along the length of the Nurbs surface and are always shown in blue. The value in the depth or V direction determines how many control lines are placed along the depth of the surface, and these are displayed in yellow. So let's try that with our surface that we have here, our Nurbs object. We'll select the Reconstruct tool, click on the object, and then you can see we can modify those parameters here. Let's change the number of control points. So we change the number of control points in the length direction to 4. Now we got 4 lines. Change the depth of V direction to 4, and now we have 4 going in that direction. So that's going to give us the number of points that we want on the object. Now also notice that just by default, because of the type of surface that we reconstructed, it's defaulting to a degree of 1. And you can see if we were to move one of those controls, you can see that we're actually getting no smoothing through those control points. Now if we were to reconstruct that again and increase the degree of smoothing, as I said, most of my surfaces are a degree of 3. You can set that to anything that you want. Now if I move those control points, you see that we're getting a nice smooth interpolation of that surface through those control points. So with that, let's modify those controls and sort of sculpt the type of shape that we want. Now that we have the shape of the floor for the second story the way we want it, let's have it blend or transition into the top of the column. We'll turn the controls off here and go back to the blend tool that we used earlier. So I'll select the 2 edges, and you can see you can create a nice little blended transition. Now also notice that we do have some control handles here which allow us to further edit the type of tangency or the continuity of that surface. So as we saw earlier, we can change these values to be positional or tangential, but we can tweak those even further. There are some magnitude sliders that we can slide back and forth to increase or decrease the overall tangency, and we can actually pinpoint the exact locations of where we want to increase or decrease the tangency at those positions. So you can see here I can actually take each location and drag these arrows to fine tune or tweak that blended transition exactly the way we want it. Now once we have that set up, that looks pretty good. So let's copy that over to the other side. So select those objects. Once again, use our mirror tool, the copy option, and copy that over to the other side. At this point, let's go ahead and continue on creating the second story floor and have it blend into the top front of our sign over here. So let's fill in this area. We'll create another 2D rectangle, and we'll convert that to a Nurbs object. And then once again, use the Reconstruct tool and give it a little degree of smoothing. And here's another little tip for you. If you use an odd number for the number of control points, in most cases you'll get a control line right in the center of that surface. So for example, with a 4x4, you can see if I change that to 5 control lines, you can see that 5th one, or that odd numbered one, is usually placed somewhere in the center of that surface. So now I can take that one control that's in the center there and maintain some symmetry with that shape. So let's drag that out a certain distance and put a little curvature for that floor in the second story. So let's turn these controls off, and let's create a nice little blended transition from this area of the floor down to the top of our sign over here. So once again, we'll use the blend tool. We'll use the multi-edge blending process, so I'll select that edge, and then I'll hold down the shift key, and let's grab all of these edges. Let's see what this looks like. See if this is the type of look that we want. Okay, I let go of the shift key, click a blank area, and it creates a nice little blended transition for us. Now actually what I want to do is take the wood, and I want to actually have that come straight up and go straight back, and here it's sort of spreading across that entire distance. So let's undo, and so let's modify this blending process. And so I'll use the split tool again to split that Nurbs surface, and we'll tell it to split it 3 times. And then I can create a nice little blend just from this one edge to that edge to create the transition on the outside parts first, and then I'll do some other blends here to fill in the actual sign detail into that part of the floor. Now to do that, since I have 3 wood panels here, let's have 3 blending transitions that all converge up to that edge. So I can actually split this Nurbs surface again 3 times. So now I have 3 edges for 3 different Nurbs surfaces. So now if I were to blend from the edge of this Nurbs surface to that one, you can see we can actually extend or blend our wood so it blends into that part of the floor, and do the same thing with the other wood panels. And then if we want, we can drop our wood material onto those, and now we're getting more of the look that we want as the wood is transitioning up to a single edge of our top floor up there. Now if we want, we can actually take our separate Nurbs wood panels here and merge those together into one single Nurbs surface, and that's accomplished using the Nurbs Merge tool. The Nurbs Merge tool lets you merge any two Nurbs surfaces together and creates one Nurbs surface with one set of controls. And the two surfaces don't even have to be touching on the edges exactly. Even if there's a gap there, it can actually pull those together. So let's see how we can do that with our project. So we'll go back and look at these wood panels here, and I'm going to get rid of these transitions here because I'm going to recreate those after I merge those panels. So we can clearly see what's going on here. Let's use the Nurbs Merge tool. We click on our two objects, and you can see it merges it together into one single Nurbs surface. Now if we want, we also have these control handles here which let us adjust or further fine-tune or tweak the extend or trim of that surface as it overlaps into the other surface to get a nice smooth transition there. And there, now we have one single Nurbs object. We can merge these other wood panels together. Once again, Merge tool, click on our pieces, and fine-tune that a little bit to sort of get a nice little smooth transition across that edge that is there. And let's do that with our last wood panel over here. Merge those together. And you don't have to move the yellow handles. I just like to do that. I just feel like it gives you a better, smoother transition across that edge that's there. And there we have one single wood panel now. So now what we can do is take our new position of the merged panels and recreate that gold transition between those panels. So let's select our gold material, go back to our blending tool, and we're going to be tangential on the first edge, and we'll be positional on the second. So click on this edge, click on that edge, and we get a brand new blended transition. Now as we do it over here, notice that we click on the one edge of the one Nurbs surface, but now we have multiple edges over here because we've actually converted this as two different Nurbs surfaces. So we know how to do that. Just simply hold down the Shift key. Now I can click the multiple edges over here, and then I click, and you can see now that blend works on multi-edges also. And to finish it off, we'll do the same thing over here. Click on the edge, hold the Shift key to click on those two edges, let go of the Shift key, click a blank area, and we get all these nice smooth transitions, and now that sign detail is sculpted more the way we want it. The next tool I would like to look at is the Nurbs Insert Knot tool, which allows us to insert a control line pretty much anywhere that we want on a Nurbs surface. Now this is in contrast to the Nurbs Reconstruct tool that we looked at earlier, which globally reconstructs a Nurbs surface and globally adds controls everywhere across that surface. Whereas the Nurbs Insert Knot tool will let you specifically control the position of where a single control line can be placed on that object. In addition, there's also a kink option, which allows you to create an edge of discontinuity for very creased or hard edges in very smooth surfaces. So let's apply that to our project. If we were to look at the column that's here now, let's turn on the control points and look at the current state that we're in. We have a set of control points that are here, and as we pull those out, you can see that we do have a degree of smoothing, so it does smoothly interpolate through those control point positions. So let's add an additional control here. So let's use the Nurbs Insert Knot tool. I'll click on that Nurbs object, and you can see I can add one vertically, which would be the length U direction, or I can add it horizontally in the depth V. I can drag that anywhere that I want, and you can see that the controls adjust accordingly to maintain that shape, so there's no disturbance of the form that I currently have. In addition, I can turn on the kink option, which then creates an edge of discontinuity on that new control line that I have placed in there. So now if I were to move that control point, you can see that we now have a very sharp edge there, or a crease into that surface. Now I want to take this new control point that I have, and I want to position it at a specific location along the front glass that we have over here, so that when we add a kink on our gold transition, we can actually have a nice crease line coming into a common point in the center here. And for that, we'll create a common point by using the Nurbs Extract tool. The Nurbs Extract tool lets you extract a series of spline curves from a Nurbs surface. So let's try it with our project. What we're going to do is use the Nurbs Extract tool to extract some splines on the front Nurbs surface of our glass. So select the Nurbs Extract tool, click on the Nurbs object, and you can see it looks similar to the Split tool, but you can see we're not splitting the Nurbs surface. We're actually creating new spline curves that match the curvature of that surface exactly. We can change some numbers over here in Tool Options. I can say, let's extract or create 5 curves in one direction, maybe 5 in the other, so those could be mullions for the glass, or maybe you can sweep some cross-section shapes to create the structural support elements, or maybe those are mullions, and we can type in the numbers that we want. So let's just set this to 1, set the other one to 0, so now I have 1 spline curve there. To better see what's going on here, I'm going to remove that piece of glass, zoom in a little bit here, and you can see I can actually turn those controls on, and we have a true mathematical spline curve that can be used for other purposes. Now in this case, the reason why I created that was now that I have a nice curve that matches that shape exactly, now I have something that I can actually snap to. So now what I'm going to do is take my control point over here, and now I can actually drag it and snap it right to a position along that spline curve. So now the new creased edge that I have in my vertical column can now snap to a specific location right on the front facade of that glass. And then we use the same technique on the gold transition to insert a knot with a kink option. We grab the control and snap it to the other control point position of the other control that's in the vertical column to finish off the rest of the facade. Next, we'll look at the Nurbs Untrim tool, which allows us to remove trimming information from a Nurbs object. For example, holes that are cut into a Nurbs surface can be removed, and we can still retain our Nurbs surface as a Nurbs surface with a set of controls. Let's see how this was useful in this project. We were trying to conceptualize the placement of the doors in the front entrance, and so to do that we created a series of volumes or massing boxes that represent the position of those doors. And then using the Surface Split tool, I selected my Nurbs surface, and then holding the Shift key I selected all these boxes. Let go of the Shift key and click a blank area, and I can actually split those objects. And then what I can do is remove the inner portion that's split because it gives me both halves. And there's the openings in the Nurbs surface for those doors. Now if I right click on the object, you can see it's still a Nurbs object, so I can trim it and cut it with lines or volumes or whatever I want and slice it up to create a more complex shape. And I still have it as a Nurbs object. Now later on, if I want to remove some of the holes or some of the trimming or slicing that I've applied to that Nurbs surface, I can select the Nurbs Untrim tool, and I can just select any of the trimming information that's in that Nurbs surface, and actually I can get rid of every hole if I want, and now you can see that we still have our original Nurbs object with all the controls for further modifications. Speaking of slicing Nurbs objects, let's look at how we created the recessed detail in the front vertical columns. We started by creating some 2D profile shapes, and then we'll slice those into the Nurbs surface. We'll need to adjust the reference plane orientation because the slicing profiles extend perpendicular to the current plane. So with the Slice tool active, the heel option's off, select your Nurbs object, select your 2D profile, and the 2D profile will slice right through it to create a detail like that. Let's take the surface that we have there and slice it with this smaller profile, and then we can delete our 2 profiles because we don't need those anymore. We can delete this inner surface that we have there, and we can maybe move this inner surface back just a little bit. And then of course to create that blended transition, we can always use the Blend tool. We got the tangential and positional options set, so that will be tangent here, positional, and just fill in all that edges with a nice little Nurbs Blend to create the little recessed detail that we have in our vertical columns. And just add a little wood detail on there, and that's how we created that. The next Nurbs tool I would like to show is the Nurbs by cross section, which lets you create a Nurbs surface by just creating some profile shapes and letting the Nurbs by cross section tool create the cross sections for you. In addition to creating the cross sections, it can also actually create the surface through those cross sections all with one single tool. And this was an integral part in creating the finials that are located on top of the vertical columns of the theater. So we started by creating a series of profile curves. You can have as many as you want. Here I have 4, and these sort of represent the overall profile shape of the intended form that I want. Select the Nurbs by cross-section tool, and then I hold down the Shift key to pick all those profiles. And you need to pick them in the right order that it'll generate the cross-section through. Clockwise or counterclockwise, either way is fine. When I let go of the Shift key, I click a blank area to tell that I'm all done picking all my profiles. Now it's still waiting. If I look at the Actions palette, it's telling me that I need to click on a line or an axis that is going to determine the direction of the cross-sections. So I click on the Z-axis, you can see that my cross-sections will be generated along the Z-axis direction. We're in the result buffer mode here, so I can change any of the parameters. Let's change the number of curves to any number that I want. We can also choose the Create Surface option, which will then generate the surface through those cross-sections. And there's our Nurbs object representing the form that I want from a series of profile shapes. Alright, let's create the rest of the detail for the finial. I want a little wood panel on the front here, so I'll select the Nurbs Split tool. Let's split it 5 times. Give us one little piece in the middle here. And I'm going to bring that out about 1 foot. Now, another way of being able to sculpt these Nurbs surfaces, which I haven't shown yet, is to use the deformation tools. For example, if I were to do a radial bend, you can see that I can actually select a Nurbs object, bend it in any direction that I want, and we're actually modifying the control point locations of that Nurbs surface when we're applying the deformation tools to Nurbs type objects. So let's bend that a little bit like that. Now we have a nice little curved wood panel. Now let's finish off the rest of the finial back here. Now to do that, I'm going to temporarily take the wood panel and move that out of the way. So I can focus just in the back section here. We can take all of these different sliced pieces that we have here that we use to create the wood panel. We can merge those back together. So let's click on those two, and now all those split surfaces are merged back into one surface. Let's split it in the vertical direction. Let's do it 3 times. And I'm going to delete the middle piece and then make a few copies of this top piece here. So let's use the move, the copy option, bring that down a certain distance. There you go, a few copies of it there. Now what we want to do is take these existing Nurbs surfaces that we have, and we want all these to extend down to the bottom over here. So we can look at another tool that we haven't looked at yet, and that's the Nurbs Attach tool. What the Nurbs Attach tool lets you do is take an edge of an existing object and actually stretch it and pull it so it can attach itself to the edge of some other object. So let's try that with these objects. What I'll do is use the Nurbs Attach tool, click on the edge of one of these existing Nurbs surfaces, click on the bottom edge there, and you can see it actually stretches and pulls it to match the bottom. Now, we do have continuity settings here. In this case, I don't want to create any type of tangency. I just want to be positional so it'll go straight to that other edge. So let's do it with these other pieces. Click on this edge and the bottom edge of that one. Click on this edge and the bottom of that one. And now we have all those surfaces attached down to the bottom. So now we can delete that inner Nurbs surface. We don't need that anymore, and that's how we get that shape that looks like this. Now the next thing I want to do is actually blend these edges back into this tallest vertical one here. Now you'll notice if I were to blend that, if I were to take this piece and blend it to that one there, it does a good job, but we are getting sort of what looks like a little crease here. I'm not sure if you can see that or not. I mean, that actually looks fine, but I can tell that one ramification of the attach process is sometimes you may not have a uniform distribution of your controls on the Nurbs object. So let's take a look at that. If I use the Nurbs Reconstruct tool, and if I were to look at that object, you can see that that attaching operation actually pulled some of the controls down so that everything attaches correctly, but yet we may not have a uniform distribution of controls. So a real quick way to fix that is just simply go in and just adjust any reconstruction parameters to reconstruct the object. I'm just going to set my degree to 3 for both of those directions, and just by changing that one number, it automatically forces it to regenerate. And that's a little tip or trick to help you out, that when you're blending surfaces together, more uniform controls gives you a lot better blending results. So let's do that. Let's finish the blending process by blending all of these additional edges back onto that taller vertical one. And that's how we create that neat little shape for the finial, by blending that back on itself. Now we need to sort of get the wood pattern back into there also. So let's finish that up by taking our wood panel and just moving it back to where it belongs. Right about there. And then once again, we'll use our blend tool by blending this back to that edge and do the same thing over here. And there we have a nice little finial that we can place on top of our vertical columns. We have one more Nurbs modeling tool left, and that's the Nurbs by Formula tool, which allows you to create 3D forms through a mathematical equation. You can put in your own equation, or you can search the library of pre-existing forms that are generated through mathematical forms. And this was an integral part with creating our nice little water fountain that's in front for creating the sculpted form. And let's see how the Nurbs by Formula tool works. Well, you select the tool, and you can see there's options inside the tool options to type in your own equation if you want. You can click the library button. You can search through all the predefined formulas that are already set up for you. If you see one that you like, you can actually click on that and also move down and look at other variations of that particular form. And maybe choose this shape right here. This was sort of interesting, this nice little figure 8 Klein bottle. I thought that looked be pretty cool for a water fountain. So I added that to the scene, and you can see you can dynamically modify any of those parameters when you add it to the scene. So I can modify by dragging these arrows, and you can also modify any of the parameters right here in tool options by adjusting the actual sliders or tweaking the equation that's there to generate a whole variety of complex 3D forms very easily using mathematical equations or formulas. And that's a quick look at every single Nurbs modeling tool that's available in both Bonsai 3D and formZ, and how they were used to create this conceptual facade of our Nurbs Theater. The second story is simply the same modeling tools used again to sculpt similar forms with some playful variations to match the look and feel of the first story. And don't forget that the Nurbs Convert tool can change any object into a Nurbs object, which makes any tool in Bonsai 3D or formZ a Nurbs tool. And this concludes the Nurbs modeling presentation.